Hello, folks, and welcome back to McFly's Movie House. I'm your host, Marta McFly, and today we are tackling another David Lynch movie. Can you believe it? This time it's 1997's Lost Highway, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I just have the biggest smile on my face, partly because I'm excited, but I'm also very nervous because Lost Highway is a challenge of a film to dissect. It is just, there's so much here. And whenever I prepare for these episodes, I start by taking notes. And for this one, I kid you not, I had 9 pages of notes, which honestly rivals the amount that we did for the World on a Wire episode. So with Lost Highway, I think the most important thing to understand is that you just kind of got to let go of any formal narrative structure and just really feel the movie above anything else. So I really think that this is a movie that you let guide you on a journey of sorts. And I've listened to theories that may not align with mine, but they're damn interesting. So I'm not here to tell you that what we talk about today is going to be the end all, be all correct analysis of this movie, but it's the best that I can do. I even struggle to call this a breakdown of a film, but more so just an educated chat, let's call it, between two David Lynch lovers. So I guess my goal with today is if you've seen Lost Highway and if you felt too lost, then maybe this will give you maybe a sliver of a eureka moment. So who is the other David Lynch lover, you may ask? It is a returning guest and someone who I believe has seen Lost Highway more times than I have. It is Seth from the ReelTok podcast and Seth Film Reviews on TikTok and Instagram. Hello, Seth. How are you?
I am well. How are you? I'm well.
I am good. Are you excited for this?
I am. I've seen it, I think, 7 times now.
Jesus.
Yeah, but I still don't get it. I don't. I think. I think the
Mhm.
most important thing is, like you said, it is literally just a feeler film. It's a film that doesn't really play by the rules, and I think that I kind of did similar to you, where I've just got a bunch of notes down of some like specific moments I want to cover, but
Mhm.
there's so many theories out there. There are so many, and
Yep.
it's going to be interesting because I don't know whether we'll think the same, but I think there's a few different ideas that people have put out there just
Ooh.
surrounding the main characters and stuff. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to it because we did one on Real Talk, more of like a shortened version, so we didn't really go into that much detail. And it was George's
Mhm.
first watch who I did it with originally. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
Amazing. Well, before we get into that, you know the drill at this point. What have you been watching lately? What do you suggest people check out?
Yeah, so I recently rewatched Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Hmm.
I hadn't seen it in probably like 5 years, and I watched it and then watched it again the day after because that just like mesmerized me. And I feel I do this thing, and this happened with Lost Highway. When I love a film, I just kind of rinse it to death. It's
Hmm.
but that was that blew me away. Maybe my favorite Coppola now, up
Wow.
there definitely. Maybe alongside Apocalypse Now, probably. I
Mhm.
rewatched Titan again, which I think
Yep.
is truly maybe the best film ever. Not to be hyperbolic or anything, but I think it's that good. Shout
Wow.
out Hitman that just dropped today, the new Richard Linklater
Hmm.
on Netflix. I did get to see that in a cinema. I know most people can't because
Ah,
Netflix releases
jealous.
are terrible when it comes to theatrical releases. That was great. Me and Anna really, really enjoyed that. Oh, and then I rewatched Mulholland Drive, which kind of, I guess, ties into this a little bit.
So did I.
Yeah, I did rewatch Mulholland Drive, which is amazing. And again, it's similar
Hmm.
to Lost Highway, where endless theories, endless different things you can speak about, and you would be writing notes for absolutely ages. Oh, and I checked out the recent, I don't know if you've seen it yet, the recent Kiyoshi Kurosawa, like 45-minute feature he just did, Chime,
No.
that just released.
No. What?
Yeah, it released well, I say released, not here. It's like a 45-minute feature because it technically is a feature. I think it's like
Hmm.
40 minutes as they cut off. Really, really interesting. Again, kind of diving
Huh.
into that paranoia and dread that's present in Cure, in Retribution, in Pulse.
Hmm.
and really, really great one. So I'd recommend anyone who likes his previous work to definitely check that out. And I think you'd really like it as well, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't even know that that came out, but that's, yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work, so I'll definitely be watching that this weekend, along with Hitman as well, which I feel like I'm the last one left to watch it, even though
I
it
don't
just
know.
came out.
Most people haven't seen it because like it just didn't. I think in the
Really?
US anyway, I think it was like 40 cinemas nationwide.
Oh.
Like it got nothing, but luckily we had it near me, and it is brilliant. Like it's really, really great. One of my favorites from him so
Hmm.
far.
Oh, I know it's playing in theaters here, so I may actually try. Now that I'm done all the Lost Highway research, this has been my life for weeks now,
You'll
so
know more than
I
I
hope it's
will.
worth it.
Then I've come into
Well,
this expecting you to know more than I will anyway.
you've seen it so much more than me, though, so we shall see. We shall see. But yeah, so let me break down what we're doing today since there is a method to my madness. There always is. We're going to describe the plot first. Obviously, for those of you who haven't watched Lost Highway, major spoilers ahead. Then I want to get into some background information about Lynch that's relevant to today's discussion. We'll also touch on the LA trilogy that this is a part of, some influences on Lost Highway, and then the meat of the episode will be chatting about the movie itself. So, how does that sound?
Perfect. Good to go.
Amazing. So, before we get into the plot, like you said, you are known to rinse movies when you like them. So, I want to know your background with the movie. You watched it, I think, a year or two ago, but then, yeah, I just remember seeing logs upon logs on
Yeah.
Letterboxd. So, what hooked you?
Um, it's a difficult one because I think that it's just David Lynch for the past kind of year and a half more than anything.
Hmm.
So I originally, when I was first started watching films, I guess properly, would you say maybe 10 years ago, whenever, I kind of
Hmm.
watched the major Lynch films like a Mulholland Drive, for example, and Elephant Man and Razorhead. Liked them, came back to them probably 18 months, 2 years ago, and then Lost Highway. So I watched a lot of the major ones prior to Lost Highway, the Mulhollands, the Razorheads, the Blue Velvets, the Dune, and Lost Highway was just one that like instantly just was everything that I could have possibly looked for in a film, just completely. I think it's for me, Lynch is absolute best in terms of
Hmm.
playing with everything, in terms of playing with, like I always say, figment of imagination or reality, which is a common theme within all of his films, particularly Mulholland Drive, particularly the LA trilogy, which obviously we go into. And yeah, I think I watched it. So I watched it the first time in January last year, and then kind of
Hmm.
just went for a period of watching it a good few times. Have started to like calm down a little bit, because have to have breaks. It was similar to what I did with Banshees of Inisherin, for example. I watched that like 9 times
Yes.
now. Very very similar, where I went for a period of just watching it. It was April. Wow. Okay, it
Yeah.
was it was actually later than I thought. And then just watched it a few times, kind of established itself now as one of my favorite films. And I think the
Hmm.
best thing about a film like Lost Highway, similar to any Lynch film, is how much you can talk about it. Is how much theories come up, is how much you can do with it. And I think that even I can watch it 7 times and be like, there's still scenes I have no idea what they mean, and there aren't
Absolutely.
many filmmakers that can provoke and revoke a feeling like that, a feeling of just being so baffled yet full of enjoyment and intrigue as well. Because there are many other directors where I maybe don't comprehend a film first watch, which is most films, but then have no urge to go back to it and have a repeat viewing. Whereas any David Lynch, maybe discounting Dune, I want to see again. You know what I mean? I think yeah,
Mm.
Lost Highway is my favorite of his, and I would consider it to be like one of my favorite films ever at this point. 7
Wow.
watches in.
That's high praise. And I mean, I
Yeah,
kind of touched on it on the beginning, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this. But you know how we always say about Tarkovsky movies or a
yeah,
Pong or a Stockwell movies that they're these sensory experiences that you go on and feel. I feel like Lost Highway is the same, albeit it's a darker sensory experience and maybe not as relaxing as War Stockwell. But would you agree?
yeah. I would. I think that it's very dependent on the person in terms of the viewer and who wants
Hmm.
to watch it. So whereas a Stackel or a Tarkovsky, I have to be in kind of a particular mindset and mood for. Whereas a Lynch, I can really watch at any point in time, and I think that just comes from my enjoyment of the film. But yeah, it's definitely a very much a sensory experience because Lynch doesn't play by the rules, especially in the LA trilogy, and they are unconventional, non straightforward narrative stories that I guess, a more common audience isn't used to seeing. And I think once you're in, you get attached instantly, but it kind of may take a few for someone to really adapt. Because again, Lynch, it's very, high melodrama, ridiculousness, absurdist cinema. And I think that could put a lot of people off. If I'd have watched Lost Highway, I think when I was 17, I'd have been like, this is, do you know what I mean? Because I'm not used to, or like Twin Peaks, for example, anything. I'd be like, this is stupid. But now, it's very much a one we have to be in, well, for someone new, has to be in the right mindset for. But now I'm at a point where I can just, same to you, probably watch it whenever.
Them.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So to briefly summarize the film's plot, we usually do the Letterboxd descriptions, but for this one, honestly, props to Letterboxd. They kept it as vague as possible to avoid spoilers.
Yeah.
So for today, because we are getting into the nitty gritty of the movie, I'm actually going to read the blurb on Wikipedia, which is slightly longer than the Letterboxd option. But it states that the film follows a musician, Fred Madison, and he's played by Bill Pullman, who begins receiving mysterious VHS tapes of him and his wife, Renee, played by Patricia Arquette, in their home. He is suddenly convicted of murder, after which he inexplicably disappears and is replaced by a young mechanic, Pete, played by Balthazar Getty, leading a different life, end quote. So that's pretty vague still, but I would also add to this that he's suddenly convicted of the murder because one of the videotapes he's getting sent showcases him having murdered his wife, which he has no recollection of. Is there anything else you would add to the bare bones of, I guess, this already confusing summary?
I just had a look at the Letterboxd one again. It is very, Letterboxd do a great job of that. I remember going into the first time and I was like, this is not what I expected at all. I actually think maybe that gives away too much, it's sort of
the wiki one.
Yeah, I think it's one where I just didn't expect the middle section or the whole second half of the film to even occur from the first place. But yeah, I think that's enough, definitely.
For sure. Yeah. So the film deals with stuff that we'll obviously get into more, characters that may or may not be real, doppelgangers, themes of paranoia, shifting identity. And Lynch himself has described the film as a Mobius strip or Mobius loop, which kind of a confusing definition, or for me at least, but it's essentially a one-sided surface that is made by connecting the ends of a rectangular strip and then I believe twisting one half of the twist. Am I making sense?
No, that's what I read as well. And I had to read it a few times. What do you mean? I have no idea. No. But yeah, that's what I read. Yeah.
Lynch himself has said of the Mobius strip, he said, the story melts prior to the beginning to arrive at the end. More than a circle, it is a spiral or a Mobius strip, which is twisted around itself.
Yes.
Whatever, I guess. Keep that in mind. But yeah, so you've heard about this comparison, correct?
Not until fairly recently, and then I read up on it and I was kind of bewildered, just absolutely baffled by the definition, to be honest. It's not something I've read into much before, honestly, at all. Same.
I've heard of it before, but it was always just, it glazes over my mind because whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's rewind for a sec and get into what was going on in Lynch's life before he made this. Are you aware of the, I guess let's call them trials and tribulations that led to Lost Highway?
Yeah, but only a small extent of it. So I'm kind of happy to just listen to you, to be honest. Cool. I only know a small extent of it, most of it anyway.
Perfect. Well, I have 2 Lynch biographies that I blitzed through, so I have a lot to say.
I do remember you recommending me one that I do need to get into. Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. So before we get into those trials and tribs, which is what I'm going to call them, Lynch had some great successes before Lost Highway. We shouldn't forget that. There was, of course, Twin Peaks, which became a cultural phenomenon, as we both know, after it premiered on ABC in, I believe it was April of 1990. And sadly, that didn't even go according to plan, as there was that studio interference and the push to have Lynch reveal who killed Laura Palmer way before he wanted to do so.
Yeah.
So the show was canceled after 2 seasons. It then came back in 2017, which we're not going to get into today. But so initially, at least, it was popular among fans. People loved Twin Peaks. And he also received a Best Director nomination for The Elephant Man in 1980, and then Blue Velvet in 1986. And even Wild at Heart from 1990 snagged the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which, side note, isn't it weird to think about Wild at Heart snagging the Palme? Like, it's just such a weird movie. Have you seen
Yeah,
it? I can't
very much
remember.
so. Yeah, yeah, Wild Heart's fantastic. Very much so. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it is
that's
bizarre.
such a strange Palme winner. But so even if American critics disliked Wild at Heart, it still got that Palme. And that same year, he landed on the cover of Time magazine. So there was just so much going on that was good for him. And he told Rolling Stone of this time of his life, he said it was a plenty high, no, it was a pretty high time, but in a high time, there's plenty of danger.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
so Twin Peaks gets canceled in June of 1991. And from there, he decides to make Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which was a prequel to the show. And he wanted to, I guess, just tie up loose ends that he didn't get a chance to do with the show. So that came out in 1992. And although it's adored by fans now, it was
No, yeah,
initially a flop, total flop, polarizing at Cannes, didn't do well in the States. It was only in Japan that it was well received. And
that's
so Lynch's
interesting.
daughter, she said in that biography that I actually want you to read, here it is, Room to
That's the
Dream.
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the one. She said Fire Walk with Me was really important to her father. And she said that he had this terrible confusion as to why it was misunderstood. And it hurt him, which in turn breaks my heart because I love Twin Peaks. I know you love Twin Peaks.
I do, but I
Yes, you
haven't
do.
finished it yet.
Oh, you
I'm stuck.
haven't?
No, so I am. It's funny you mentioned the studio interference because like that's where I
Uh
am,
huh.
and that's where I've been for a while. I'm just. It's.
Oh,
I find those episodes quite hard to get through. I'll be honest.
interesting.
Where Lynch kind of, you know, went away,
Steps away.
steps away. Yeah, but I know I need to
Yeah.
persevere because the end of season 2 is meant to be like the peak of Twin Peaks.
It's terrifying.
Exactly, which I like, which everyone likes. So I
Yes.
will get there eventually, soon, soon.
Okay. So this is good for me to know. So I'm not going to spoil anything about Twin Peaks. I was maybe going to let something slip. So
Oh,
I'll be careful.
it's good that I mentioned it. It's very good that I
Yes.
mentioned it. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Can you imagine?
Just
So
yeah.
It'd be horrible. So Fire Walk with Me, which like we said came out in 1992, that was the last feature that he did until Lost Highway. So there is a gap there. And it was a movie, like we said, that was born during a tremendously low period of his life. And he's even gone on record to say, quote, Fire Walk with Me was a beautiful experience in a way when you're down, when you've been kicked a few more times till you're really bleeding and some teeth are out, then you only really have up to go. It's so beautiful to be down there. What do you make of this, Seth, of Lynch just giving birth to this wild and twisted idea for a film during this excruciatingly low period of his life?
I think it's very Lynch. You know, it's
Yeah.
well, okay. So I'm not going to say anything now, but I think that very much ties into one of the theories for Lost Highway, one of the major
Oh.
points in Lost Highway, and one that I not necessarily lean towards, but understand
Hmm.
the assumption on. So I won't go into that now, but I think it's very Lynch that this is
Mm.
kind of his wildest imagination, and there are clear, again, I won't say too much, but there are clear critiques within the film to me towards a certain person or persons, and I think it's admirable more than anything, you know, because I think a lot of filmmakers, especially that we see now, it is okay, let's work with the studios a little bit more. Let's kind of draw things back, make things a little bit more accessible, so to speak. And that's something,
Hmm.
you know, we're seeing as a commonplace in film today. For example, Bong Joon-ho,
Hmm.
don't know if you saw the news. One of the
Yes.
reasons Mickey 17 was pushed back is because Warner Bros. Wanted it to be more successful and he didn't get his final cut, which is insane.
Ridiculous.
And it's something we could have seen with Lynch. You know, we might not have received the LA trilogy or Twin Peaks The
Hmm.
Return if so, and I think that's really, really important. I think it's very much in Lynch's character to just be like, I'm not, you know, I'm not doing this. I will keep doing what I want to. And arguably, not arguably, especially Inland Empire, in Inland Empire's case,
Hmm.
they're the most messed up of the bunch, you know? These three films right here. It's like Lost Highway, Mulholland, and especially Inland Empire, it's
Yep.
obscene, you know? And I think it's
Hmm.
just admirable to his character. Mostly, anyway.
I agree. And it just speaks to him. You're right. Like he's always been
Yeah.
like this. He's always going to keep being like this. So, I mean, we're in for a treat for a
That's why
while.
we love him. That's why he's the guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, the guy. So even though there was a pause between the two feature films, that doesn't mean that Lynch wasn't busy. He very much so was. And the whole concept from Lost Highway of disturbing videotapes arriving at the doorstep of a couple, he got that idea final night of shooting Fire Walk with Me in 1991. So he let that idea fester in his mind while he worked on other projects.
Hmm.
And between 1993 and 1994, I believe he directed 6 commercials. He was also trying to get funding for other projects and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then in 1995, he contacted Barry Gifford to help him write Lost Highway. And he
Hmm.
had already worked with him on Wild at Heart. So, why Gifford specifically? He wrote a book called Night People, which Lynch obviously read. And he noticed that in the book, a character used the phrase Lost Highway. And so he loved that. And he went to Gifford and said, let's do something with this. And Gifford said, yeah, let's go, let's do this.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And a year later, next thing you know, they started working on the script together. Side note, again, do you know the film, how it opens with the message of Dick Laurent is dead? Do you know that that actually happened to
Yeah, I
Lynch?
do. I do. I that's like my favorite
Crazy.
fun fact, like when people are
Mhm.
watching it, I'm like, oh, it's like, like Lord of the Rings, who people say, like, oh, Viggo Mortensen actually broke his toe. It's like that.
Yes.
That's like my fact with this. I remember like when I watched it with Anna for the first time, and I just kept, do you know that's real? Like, it is cool. It is a really, really cool little detail that actually have. And
Yeah.
when we did our podcast review, I said it to George as well, and he was like, no way. And I was like, yeah. It's a very, very cool fact. I do like that a lot. It's one of my favorites.
Same.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also just
Really
creepy
crazy.
as well. I mean, I
Crazy.
understand that he's famous, so like anybody could be coming to his door and saying that, but still
Even
super
so,
creepy. I would,
it's such a
yeah, like,
weird, like, it's not even that he's saying anything, normal.
yeah,
It's just such a bizarre thing to say in the first place.
totally.
Really, really cool just implementing that into the film. Love it.
Hmm.
Absolutely love it. Great.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
So, with that, there is another big piece of inspiration to Lost Highway, but that's actually a great segue into talking about the movie itself. So, I'm just going to put a pin in that for now. I think you know what
Cool.
I mean. But so, Lost Highway, 1997, this marked the start of his LA trilogy. You know, obviously, the designation of this. Yeah. So, we have Lost Highway first, then Mulholland Drive, then Inland
Inland
Empire.
Empire.
Each Exactly. Each film takes place in the same area. They deal with the darkness that festers under the glitzy surface of LA, I would say.
LA. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
all toy around with these ideas of fractured identities, deja vu, doubling. Am I missing anything?
No, I'd say they're the main things. Yeah, fractured identities. Maybe
Yeah,
eroticism as
deja.
well. Dreams.
Oh, yeah.
I'd
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
argue
yeah.
there's one, but yeah, you've got kind of the main three, the main
Yeah.
ones, I'd say, definitely.
And I would say that with Lost Highway, because this is the start, he expands upon these even more in the other ones. And as you were saying, Inland
Yeah,
Empire, I mean, if you think Lost Highway is confusing, Inland Empire will put your brain through like a blender. Like it's
I mean, that's like 3 hours of Lynch just going insane,
crazy.
just like the most ridiculous. I've only seen that once, so if you
Hmm.
asked me to do a podcast on that,
Same.
I'd be like, let me just watch that like 10 more times, and then I might be able to do it because that is
If you're alive.
that's the level of like
Exactly.
insanity. So yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think there are those themes are established more and more as the films go on, especially
Hmm.
when you go on to Mulholland Drive in terms of particularly
Yes.
identity. But yeah, I think Lost Highway is kind of this starting point, and it's a hell of a starting point, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was interesting for me. I mean, you did the same thing recently. I rewatched Mulholland Drive after Lost
Yeah,
Highway, and watching them so close to one another, it really made me realize that Mulholland Drive is more polished. It's like taking these ideas of Lost Highway, but making
absolutely.
them more polished and easier to follow, I think.
Yeah, no, I
No?
100% think I agree. I think that Mulholland Drive, even though okay, in a normal sense, it still follows a Lynchian formula. It's
Hmm.
also there's a reason Mulholland Drive is probably his most popular film now, and I think
Hmm.
the reason is while it is still crazy, there is a narrative to follow, and it's understandable to an extent. It's still got a
Hmm.
lot of theories, and there's still a lot to it in terms of the different characters, but it's still followable. Whereas Lost Highway, I would argue, is a little bit more messy and a little bit
Yes.
more. I don't know how to say this without it coming across as bad on Lynch, but I guess amateurish in terms of what he wants to provide, in terms of Lynch just going straight
Yeah.
into it and going balls to the wall. Maybe not amateurish is the right word, but I don't know. It's definitely harder to follow, and there's a reason that Lost Highway hasn't gained the popularity that Mulholland Drive is even now, because it
Hmm.
is more strenuous on the brain. It's harder to follow. There isn't a direct line to follow, especially when you get into that middle portion of the film, which we'll go on to. So yeah, I
Hmm.
definitely agree. I think it becomes a lot more clean and precise, maybe, as the film. Well, no, it doesn't. It goes Lost Highway, whatever, and then Mulholland Drive is a bit more clean, precise. Then Inland Empire is like he's just gone
It's
completely
yeah,
just the other way again for 3 hours. But yeah, I agree. Definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that now brings us to the influences on Lost Highway. Do you want to lead with any for starters?
Yeah, I honestly kind of struggle. I think a lot of the main ones I read, I'm gonna forget her name actually.
Oh,
You
I know
might
where
know.
you're going with this.
Does her name begin with an M, by any chance?
Yep. Do you want me
Maya
to?
Deren?
Yeah. There
Yeah.
you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously one of the most influential filmmakers in the surrealism space.
yeah. Yep.
I imagine a lot of it will go back to her, and that's a lot what I read as well. A lot of the
Hmm.
imagery, and also in terms of identity and just dreams in general, like meshes of the afternoon. I
Yep.
actually went through her, I guess, filmography fairly recently. Like the rest of it, I'd seen that one a while ago.
Same.
I'd also bring one to mention that I did think of, and again, this one I haven't read anything about, so I don't know whether it is true. But in terms of
Hmm.
directly imagery and the more surreal aspect, I go back to, have you ever seen The Seashell and the Clergyman by any chance?
No, but why does
So
that
that,
sound so familiar?
well, you probably have heard of it, and it was one of the, may have even been the officially first, I guess, surrealist film in the late
Hmm.
20s, directed
Hmm.
by Germaine Dulac, who was a French, she was a French filmmaker. And that was like, I think, the official earliest surreal film. Obviously, someone in the comments might correct me if I'm wrong. And when I
Hmm.
watched that, it is similar to like Mesh of the Afternoon. I think that could have been argued as well. But again, that's just me kind of playing with it
Uh-huh.
a little bit. But yeah,
I
Maya
love
Deren,
that.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So it had, yeah. So as you were saying, you went the surrealist route, which I love. My Darren Meshes in the Afternoon, which I mean, when you watch it, there's some scenes that are like totally similar to it. Like the first half in Fred's house
And
felt
Fred's
like
house. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Meshes. Yeah, felt like
Yeah,
Meshes for sure. So you have the surrealism, you also have the noir influence, I would say as well.
of course.
I would say Lost Highway is a surrealist neo noir. And actually, I think he himself has dubbed it a 21st century noir horror film.
Well,
But
yeah,
then in
yeah.
another interview, he like revoked that, and he was like, "That's
Yeah, and
baloney. It's a
it's
mystery."
it's quite hard to follow Lynch, because when you look into any of his interviews, he Love Lynch regularly contradicts himself and just goes back on what he said previously. So, and also just doesn't
Absolutely.
like to reveal anything of anything, which I like. That's part of the reason why he's
Hmm.
so beloved. Because if he just came out and said what the meaning of the film was or what the point of it was, the mystery wouldn't be quite as poignant, would it? In the long
Totally.
term, definitely.
Exactly. But this has so many noir tropes as well. I mean, it has the dangerous femme fatale, it has the, I would argue, hard boiled protagonist or
Yeah,
even anti hero in a way.
absolutely.
The
Especially in the
dialogue is
second half.
tight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just this like overall tone of bleak pessimism. So, I mean, I see it as a noir for sure, no matter what David Lynch says.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm completely with you. I think it
Have you
has the
seen
exact tropes.
Detour from 1945?
No, I don't think I have, because I'm pretty sure that's been on watch list for a while actually. Got the filmmaker, I
Hmm.
can't remember who was it again.
Edgar G. Ulmer.
No, I haven't. I actually, yeah, I was meaning to watch that because that's the one with Tom Neal. I've been meaning to watch that previously, but I've heard a lot about. I've heard really, really great things. Definitely.
Hmm. So that one carries some similarities to Lost Highway, including some
Okay.
visual nods, like the role of the like down on his luck musician
Yeah,
who's in a complicated relationship and so on and so forth, femme fatales, blah blah blah. But that's actually a huge similarity to Lost Highway, I would say, or as much as it can be if you take away the surrealism.
of course, of
So
course. It's
yeah,
a combination of
definitely
a
check
bunch
it
of
out.
stuff. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then what do we say? So we have Maya Deren. I would say that's probably it. I can't think of anything
Yeah,
else.
it's kind of hard to pinpoint much, honestly. I mean, you could go over the general all of the general like early surrealism stuff, and you could go
Hmm.
over many noirs because again, like you said, it follows a lot of the similar tropes and formulas that a noir
Yep.
would. But then again, you could just name hundreds of films in terms of a
Any.
noir space because they all follow that formula. But I think it's
Exactly.
just a general combination of a bunch of stuff, really, isn't it? And also his
For
own
sure.
eye
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, his own brand of surrealism. And
Yeah,
I mean, as you know, Lynch has always been a fan of exploring the subconscious. And I would even say that Lost Highway, and I'm not talking about anything that came after it, but up until the point that Lost Highway was made, nothing to me was as hallucinatory or as structured as taking place in somebody's mind since his debut, Eraserhead, in 1977. No?
I agree. I agree. No, I agree.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's also worthwhile noting on that note that Lynch has always been a very vocal advocate of transcendental meditation, which is a practice that he started in the early 1970s, and it's a huge part of his life. He says that it helps him creatively to access these regions of his brain, and he does this twice a day, every day, for decades now. And he said many, many times that he refuses to explain his films and he thinks that people should come up with their own interpretations and pull them from his subconscious. So to me, that's really cool because his movies are those where you sit at a table with your friends or what we're doing now, and you
Yeah.
could come up with your own theories, and they're so wildly different. So I mean, maybe that meditation has helped him access these weird corners of his brain. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think that a lot of the issue with film is the need for an answer, a need for a
Hmm.
solidified answer anyway. And that comes back to what I used to do. When I was younger, I'd watch confusing films. I'd immediately go, YouTube explained or Google explained. And I think that's a lot
Yes.
of what it comes into. And I think the need for an
Hmm.
answer can do nothing but kill enjoyment because I think a lot of films are just meant to be felt like a Lost Highway, and then you can come up with
Yes.
your own ideas later. And I think that's for me, that was a very much a transitional period where I started enjoying films more, was when I allowed them to just be there and felt rather
Hmm.
than just immediately searching for an answer afterwards. And I think that's exactly what Lynch doesn't want people to do. He doesn't want people to go on Google and be like, what does it mean? That's why he won't answer it in interviews and stuff. Because again, the allure of his films would not be as strong if there was a definitive answer. It wouldn't be at all.
Hmm.
100%.
Exactly. And to piggyback off of that point, it's also interesting to think about Lynch and his background as a painter too, which I assume you know he comes from a
Yes.
painting background. And I really do think that to approach Lost Highway, you should approach it kind of how you would going to a museum, looking at a surrealist painting. And sometimes you just need to look at it, take a step back, and look at it as a whole versus getting close to the painting where it's just going to be ugly and nothing's going to make sense and
Yeah,
you're just going to be
exactly.
confused,
Yeah,
right?
I mean it's abstract art, and this is the whole conversation that
Hmm.
people go into with it. And I think, like, take it from me, I've seen this film 7 times. It's one of my favorite films ever at this point, and I still don't understand like much of it. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, I think that's the best part. I want to. That's why I've rewatched it so many times because there's so much that goes into it. And I want to come up with my own theories, and I think, yeah, I think people would just enjoy, especially Lynch films, much more if they didn't immediately need an answer. Just make your own. That's the
Exactly.
fun of it. That's
Exactly.
the main fun of it. That's the great part, definitely.
I could not agree more. So I guess this now brings us to Lost Highway and trying to make sense of it. I'm very
Yes.
excited. I'm going to bring up the other major source of inspiration that I mentioned earlier. I assume you know where I'm going with this.
No.
Kind of.
I
No.
can't
Oh,
remember
you
what we
don't.
mentioned earlier.
Oh, so it's
Oh,
the OJ
wait. OJ
Simpson.
Simpson. Okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
There you go,
yeah.
there you go.
So the O.J. Simpson murder trial, which spanned from no, sorry, January to October in 1995, and more so Simpson's attitude
Yes.
and his nonchalance after getting acquitted. So let me read you another quote from Lynch himself. He said, "Quote." Here's a guy who, at least I believe, committed two murders, and yet he's able to go on living and speaking and doing. And so, what does the mind do after a horrific murder to protect itself from that knowledge and go on? And Barry Gifford and I talked about that. How does the mind trick itself so that that experience can be put in a place where it no longer has that horrific power and you go on living? End quote. So what does Lynch come up to in regard to what the mind does? He researched a psychological state that is called a psychogenic fugue, or was called a psychogenic fugue, but I believe it's now called a dissociative fugue.
That's the one.
So
Yeah.
before I get into the definition of that, do you know what it is?
It's essentially what you describe it as, isn't it? In terms of, you bending the mind in terms of, forgetting reality and entering the
Yeah.
state of kind of removing the traumatic, I guess, part
Yeah.
of your brain at that moment, which is
So
why O.J. Simpson's such an interesting. Like when I first heard the O.J. Simpson inspiration was actually after I watched it for the first time, then went back and watched it. Makes very much
mm,
sense, especially when you go back and watch Lynch's interviews specifically about it. So yeah, it's a
mhm.
really, really interesting one. Really interesting.
Hmm. I'm happy that you brought up traumatic because that wasn't in Lynch's quote that I mentioned, but it's absolutely what it is. So,
Yeah.
this fugue state happens, as you said, after a sudden traumatic or stressful experience. And that's why a person loses awareness of their own identity. So, it is kind of like a form of amnesia. And
Yeah,
people who
absolutely.
experience this, they may develop a new identity. So that is exactly what happens to Fred Madison, or in my opinion, some people may have different theories, but I believe that that's what happens to
We'll
him
get into the theories, I'm
personally.
sure. Yeah, we'll get
Oh,
into the other
okay,
theory.
okay, okay.
Well, actually, well,
But
spoiler, I'm kind of with you anyway, but we'll get into the
okay,
theories
good.
anyway.
Whew.
Yeah,
Thank God.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
But so when I was researching this, I thought about like other examples of this fugue state in pop culture, and one that I came up with.
Okay.
Did you? I assume you watched Breaking Bad. Did you?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, everybody did. But do you remember that Walter uses a psychogenic fugue or dissociative fugue as an excuse
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. That makes
when
sense
he's in
now.
the grocery store, right? And I
Oh
believe he's like
wow.
naked in the grocery store, right?
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that. That's
Yeah.
actually brought. I remember. Yeah, I've never actually thought of that. I never actually thought of the connection
Hmm.
between them. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I can't think
Oh
of
wow.
anything else in pop culture, but those are the two: Lost Highway and Breaking Bad.
I can't think of it at the top of my head, but I think Breaking Bad's a great one. I've never looked into
Yeah.
that. And when I was researching it a couple of days ago, just about fugue state in
Mhm.
general, that Breaking Bad didn't even come up. That's actually really. Did you think of that one? Did you find that one?
No, that was a
Yeah.
McFly classic. So
Wow, that's great.
that was
Yeah, no,
good.
I didn't.
Thank you.
That's a really good one. I just remembered that's a really good one.
Yeah,
Definitely,
I
I
mean,
can't
I
think of
loved
any more.
Breaking Bad.
Of
Breaking Bad was
course,
great. I need to rewatch it
we could
again.
do an
I
episode on
always do.
Breaking Bad. That would be a long one. That would be
That would, yes, that would be
that would
very,
be
very
that'd be
multiple.
ridiculous. But yeah, no, that's
You
definitely a
would
great
join the
example.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So my theory on Lost Highway and what I based my research on was essentially backed by this idea of the fugue state, which Lynch himself has admitted to, and which I think is also rare because he usually doesn't offer up any insight to his films, but he does
yeah,
back the theory of the fugue state. So I think I mean,
yeah.
there you go.
I saddening to say. I would prefer if we argued about this. Get a bit different.
Yeah.
I agree. I've always had a similar viewpoint. Not even well, I guess necessarily on the fugue state, but I think that's very much the case in Lost Highway. And there are
Hmm.
some really interesting theories that I definitely understand. There are some other really
Hmm.
interesting stuff which obviously we'll get into, but I do think that's very much the case. It's
Hmm.
yeah. I think it's very, very much the case with this. Absolutely.
And I mean, the reason why I decided to go with this idea is, I mean, A, it came out of Lynch's mouth himself. So what more do
Yeah,
you
of
want?
course. Of course.
But two, I really do firmly believe that he offers up hints throughout the movie. I really, really, really do that help prove this theory. And so the movie opens up with this clearly unhappy couple of Fred and
Yeah.
Renee. He thinks she's cheating on them. Their relationship is incredibly awkward and strained. Even their like dialogue and sex life, it's just all depressing.
Yeah,
And
it's a very much a weird state to be in. Like I was watching when I watched it earlier last night.
mhm.
It's even when you go back to the scene of them just talking about day-to-day life, it's so
Oh,
mundane. It's
I
so
know.
like she's asking if he's going to go to the club tonight and stuff, and it's so mundane and
Hmm.
depressing. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's even from the early, it's definitely just showing a couple in sadness, essentially.
Distress. Yes,
Yeah,
sadness.
exactly.
That's better than distress.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so their apartment is also very barren, everything is underlit, and it builds this sort of festering discomfort inside of you, or me at least.
Yeah,
And there's that famous scene of Fred walking into the darkness of his hallway that's pitch black. And to me, that sort of signified him almost walking into the dark crevices of his mind as he's slowly losing control.
completely agree.
The film even opens with that Bowie song, and it actually ends with the same song, I'm Deranged.
Yeah.
So yeah, you said you agree. I mean, is there anything you want to add to that beginning, I
No,
guess?
I completely agree. I think him walking into the darkness, that kind of opening shot. And again, it
Mm,
seems obvious when you say this in your mind, and I think that's exactly what Lynch was going for, is walking into that and kind of entering that dark space in his mind. I completely agree in the opening scene. I think it sets the opening conversation with both everything. I
mhm.
think everything sets that up to obviously what we see probably 30 minutes later in terms of that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then we keep getting clues. Then we get the appearance of the mystery man. I think that the mystery man is a figment of Fred's mind that's clearly disintegrating. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always seen the Mystery Man as a physical. I do think it's a manifestation. I think it's a physical
Hmm.
manifestation of Fred's guilt. I think that's exactly what it is. I think
Hmm.
the Mystery Man is his conscience. It's a reminder to Fred of what happened. It's him. That's his real mind entering. That's his conscience trying to pull him back into
Hmm.
the real state and remind him of what's occurred. And I think that's
Hmm.
why in Lost Highway specifically, the videotapes are such a big thing because it's a constant
Hmm.
reminder. The videotapes are a reminder. The videotapes are intrusive memories. I think that's exactly
Hmm.
yeah. So it's a manifestation of in Fred's mind.
Ooh, okay, interesting. So we agree on the Mystery Man, but we may not
Mm.
agree about the tapes. So we'll get into that in a bit.
Okay.
But oh, I'm interested now. But so with the Mystery Man, I agree with you. And there are again clues that he's not real, that he is just a
Yeah.
manifestation of Fred's mind. Because when you notice when they go to the party, Fred and Renee go to this party, the Mystery Man appears. Did you notice that the noise of everything in the background is lowered?
Just
Which
yeah.
obviously wouldn't happen at a party.
Yeah, I mean that signifies towards it being a figment of imagination because everything just lowers and then
Exactly.
there's a sudden just attention to this guy walking up to him and everything kind
Hmm.
of blurs and lowers. So
Hmm.
that would obviously indicate the figment of my imagination, of course. I love
Hmm.
that scene, by
And
the way. I love that
same.
scene. It's so
It's
good. It's so
incredible.
good.
And
Yeah.
he's so creepy. I can't think of that actor's name right now. Why can't I think of his
Oh,
name?
I was watching an interview with him. I'll get it up because he's right in front of me now. His name is Robert Blake. His name is Robert
Robert
Blake.
Blake. Yes,
That's the
yes,
one.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And he also had his own real life trial, murder trial. He was acquitted for it. Do you know this?
Yeah, I did. I don't know anything about it, but I have heard about it. Yeah, I have no idea anything about it though. Definitely,
Not for today, not for today, but you can look into it. But it is kind of creepy to think that he does this role and then he has like this weird
his
mirroring in
own.
his real life. Yeah.
Mm.
But so yeah, so the party scene, there's also, I mean, he even says to Fred, he says, "You invited me in. I can't go where I'm not invited." So
Hmm.
obviously entering his mind,
Yeah,
which is kind of similar to what happens in Twin Peaks, but I'm not gonna say more because you haven't finished it yet.
good.
So Lynch himself has admitted that the mystery man from Lost Highway is similar to somebody in Twin Peaks. And so there
I
is
know who
proof
it
to
is.
support.
Do
Oh,
I know
you
who it is?
do? Okay.
Wait, he
Maybe.
sure is it the
M-
the really creepy guy who's really
The sh-
scary,
yes, 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 yes.
and he has no. I'm on
No.
about I'm not going to say it. But I'm on about the guy in Twin Peaks who was working on the film set and then Lynch hired because he had a look.
No.
You know
No,
who I
no, no,
mean,
no.
don't you?
It's yes, it's the
Okay,
man
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
another place, the one that's in the Black Lodge,
Have I
the
seen
one
that
that
yet?
talks backwards. Yes.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, the one in the yeah.
Yes.
No, yeah, that
Yes,
makes
yes,
more
yes,
sense.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So there is proof to support that as well.
Hmm.
Because remember the first time we see the Mystery Man's shack in Lost Highway?
Yes.
The scene visually opens up like curtains. And so in Twin Peaks, there's the Black Lodge. Whenever Cooper goes there, he's surrounded by literal curtains. It's also worthwhile mentioning, I don't know if you noticed this, but the setup of the inside of the shack with the couch and the chair is similar to the Red Room in the Black Lodge. Did you pick
Yes, it
up on
is.
this? Oh,
Yes, it
you
is.
did. Damn.
Yes,
I was
I
so
did.
proud of
Yes.
myself with that one.
Yeah, no, I did. I can't remember if I read this. I actually have it down in my notes of the similarities between the
Mm.
two. I also noted about Lynch's use of curtains as well, in not just Twin
Yes.
Peaks, but multiple of his films. Again,
Yes.
potentially to represent that figment of dream or reality or whatever. It's something he
Hmm.
uses quite a lot. But I didn't put two and two together about him and Mystery Man, though. I didn't think about that,
Okay.
and it makes complete sense now I think about it.
I mean,
Absolutely.
listen, you've watched Lost Highway 7 times. I think I've watched Twin Peaks or the first 2 seasons,
Yeah.
maybe like 10 times myself.
Oh,
So
yeah. I haven't even
that's
seen
why.
season. I haven't even finished season 2 yet, so that might be why.
Yeah. I gotta start up again, but it's so long. But anyway,
Yep.
so what does this bring us to now? The videotapes. Yes, I wanted to cover the videotapes with you. So this was my main question that was tripping me up. If Fred is slowly entering a fugue state, then are the videotapes real? I have a theory. I want to hear yours. Are they real or no?
That's an interesting one. I would say, if I had to lean, I'd say no. Personally,
Oh,
I would
okay.
I would go back to my previous argument in that
Uh-huh.
they are a figment, and again, that is the mystery man delivering them before we see the mystery man, in that
Okay.
they are constant reminders. That would be
Okay.
my
Ah.
take from it. Anyway, what's yours?
So
I'm intrigued.
this is what I love about it. Even though we have the same theory of the fugue state, we still
No,
have like differing opinions.
okay,
So
I'm really interested in your videotape
s-
opinion.
I
I
mean,
am.
I went into a deep hole, and I don't know if it's right. I don't know if this is going to make sense. So
Nothing's
I
right.
think
Nothing's right.
that's
Nothing's
true,
wrong.
and nothing's wrong. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
So I think that they're real. Fred and Renee watch the tapes. They then call in the detectives, right? Who
Mhm.
then ask if the couple owns a camcorder. And Renee
Yeah.
then says that Fred hates them. And he says, I like to remember things my own way, not
Yeah.
necessarily how they happened.
How they
And I
happen.
think that's telling because, of course, then we get to the discovery of Renee's body and Fred kneeling over her on video, which again proves that Fred is choosing not to remember things how they necessarily happen. So, do we at least agree on that? Yes?
Yes. Yeah. Of
Yes.
course.
Okay. So this is where I think we differ. So if you watch the tapes, you realize that they're shot from a surveillance perspective and it's quite fluid. So it's not like someone is actually videotaping them. The camera is shaky. It's
Yeah.
fluid.
It's yeah.
So do you notice that when the cops come, they're looking up towards the ceiling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, and again, I could be wrong, but I think that Fred begins losing his grip on reality well before he's in jail, as we said when he's first walking down the
Yeah.
hallway.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And so the tapes I think are real because Fred could be delivering them to himself and then completely blanking out. And he could technically have surveillance cameras in his house that could be looking at everything. And then he could hide those cameras in his mental fog so they're not there when the cops come. So Fred also uses his alarm system as well when he's home, so nobody
Yeah.
could have broken in. Am I making sense?
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it. It's one I haven't thought before. Did you think that yourself? Is
Yes,
that
but
okay?
because the sole reason is because it's fluid. And that's
Because
it.
it's fluid.
For me, what gave it away was the cops looking up and me realizing it's not, it doesn't look like someone's in there.
It
It's
makes
all from
sense.
that. Yeah.
It does
I
make
don't
sense.
know.
No. It makes sense. I think that I can understand why you come to that conclusion. Absolutely. I've never
Mhm.
thought about it that way.
I don't know. But who
I
knows?
still think they're fake.
Okay.
But that was you might have got me a little bit. I do get it because I think, like you said, when they're looking you up the whole time, there's clear,
Mhm.
and again, like you said, it's not like someone's recording. It's a shaky surveillance looking camera
Mhm.
or recording, should I say? So, and I think like you went back to one of the main telling sequences in this film, which is going to determine where you land on your interpretation, is the shot of Fred and the body. That's going to be one of the
Mhm.
main determining factors.
Mhm.
So yeah, I get it. I do like it. I'm not sure. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, neither am I. I mean,
No
yeah, I
one's
don't know. I
sure.
needed I
No
needed to
one.
pick something, so I just went with this.
No, I do
But
like it. Yeah. I do like it.
I like yours
Interesting.
too. So who's to say? But so it begs the question: when does the fugue state start? Like officially, officially, not just the walking down the hallway, because shortly after the discovery of the murder on one of the videotapes, Fred gets sent to death row. So he's in prison in isolation. And we have to remember that a fugue state occurs to protect the mind from itself when
From
reality
itself.
becomes unbearable. So that would be after he murders his wife, right? And right? Because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
would be a
yeah, yeah.
huge
Because
trauma. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, so the whole fugue state, what's it called again now?
That
This is
dissociative fugue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So common, mental illness is depersonalization, derealization, which is the whole concept
Hmm.
that it's a brain reacting to previous trauma, and what it does is make you panic, and kind of one of the main symptoms that can come from that is memory loss in a sense. So that's a less
Hmm.
severe version. So you have to imagine that the fugue state, the official fugue state, as you say, the real one, rather than just Fred's descent into madness like we see when he's
Hmm.
walking through, is after said traumatic event. Unless you think something happened previously, you have
Hmm.
to assume that it's after the death of his wife or the killing of his wife. Yeah,
Hmm.
I would say so. So I
Hmm.
would always argue that it's when he is on death row, because it's
Exactly. Same here.
sometime after. It's descending. I think to enter a real fugue state like that, you have to be someone who is descending previously. And I think that's what we are seeing in the early openings of Lost Highway. And then that's like the real tip. That's the real tip over the edge, the real
Yeah.
tip over the barrier. That's where it all culminates in the official fugue state, where, as we'll move on to, the new identity is taken on. So yeah, I agree, 100%.
Yes. Okay. So we are in agreement about that. And you
Mm-hmm.
know who else agrees? It is Barry Gifford, the co-writer.
Yes.
And he actually says that in this book. So I have a different book for you now, Lynch on Lynch. And in the
Oh
book,
yeah,
Barry
yeah,
Gifford,
I do remember.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have this one?
No, I do remember. Yeah, I do. I will. I might order that straight after this because I do need to read them.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah, I
love it.
will. I will.
So in the book, Gifford says, quote, I guess it's fair to say that it's really about a man who finds himself in a dire situation and has a kind of panic attack. He has a very difficult time dealing with the consequences of his actions, and this
Yep.
fractures him in some way. So, I mean, he co-wrote the movie. What else do you want, right? Like, I
Yeah.
really do think
Uh,
that it starts in prison.
I
So
agree.
he's in prison. He's waiting to be placed on the electric chair. You could
Hmm.
also argue, or wait a minute. Now I'm just confusing myself. No, it must be then. It must be then.
It
Because I
is
was going
then.
to say, you could also argue that it starts right after the murder. So before he's in jail. So everything that follows is a fantasy because at the end of the movie, he's driving away on the highway. But I
Yeah.
think that he's actually in prison. And I do have a theory about the ending itself.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously what we'll go on to is the whole meaning of a highway, which is
Hmm.
obvious in my opinion. But yeah, I would. I mean, you could argue that. You could argue it's directly after. But then also, I would look back to, real life examples, not anything to mind, but I think that
Hmm.
most of the time, something like a fugue state would take place time after said event and it would
Hmm.
build up. So
Hmm.
I would definitely say that it's when he is on death row,
Yes.
that's where it takes place and that's where the switch happens. Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree.
Thank you for guiding me back. I very briefly there tempted myself to like go in a
Yeah.
different direction.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
get it.
happy that I didn't. So, do you want to get into the portion now, into the Pete portion after that follows after Fred is in prison, unless you want to add anything else?
No, I think we covered everything in the
Yeah.
opening.
So, as we know, one day a prison guard comes to check on Fred in death row, and lo and behold, Fred isn't there. It is Pete Dayton, the car mechanic. Absolutely crazy. He then gets released. His parents grab him. He goes home.
Yep.
Visually, when we first properly see Pete's life back home, do you notice, again, visually, how different everything is? It's bright,
It's
it's lit
bright, it's
properly.
shining. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to that fugue state of putting him in a position which is better than he is in,
Hmm.
which is a common theme within the whole second half, with not just
Exactly.
the world, but his relationship. His sexual relationship, his
Hmm.
relationship in general, which also will go into. But yeah, definitely, definitely.
Hmm. It honestly kind of reminded me visually when we first see him in the yard and everything of Blue Velvet a little bit.
I get that. Yeah.
Hmm.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, visually, especially Blue Velvet's kind of opening. 20
Yes,
minutes or so.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what
100%.
I'm thinking of. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And so this segment is so classic Lynch, that concept that he's so well known for taking these very contemporary and familiar American settings and then pulling the curtain back and revealing these ugly aspects that lie under the surface. So
Yes.
we see hints of Fred's previous life creeping into Pete's, almost reminding him that something is off. Are there any that you can think of that you want to quickly touch on before I do?
What, in the opening section?
Just in total, during his time in Pete's mind, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously his relationship, that's one we already
Hmm.
covered, is vastly
Hmm.
different in terms of mainly how she portrays him,
Hmm.
how she sees him. Also his life in general, his age particularly as
Hmm.
well. His
Oh, I didn't think of
personality.
that.
His personality also massively.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it also is a case where obviously Pete is significantly younger as well.
Hmm.
So that could be argued he's put himself back into this state. I'm trying to think of any others. What are the main ones?
There's specific ones. So you mentioned personality, but if we dive into that specifically, there's the concept of Pete not liking saxophone music, and Fred was a
Oh, of
saxophone
course.
player,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So I think we actually hear Fred's sax solo on the radio, right? Which in itself
You,
is kind of
you
weird to
do.
be hearing
Because
that.
he's like a counterpart, isn't he? He's literally an exact
Yes,
counterpart of him. Yeah, of
exactly.
course.
And he hates it. He immediately shuts it out or shuts it off. Then there's also the gangster, Mr. Eddie, who we later discover is a porn producer, but he asks Pete directly, "Do you like porn?" To which Pete says no. And obviously he says no because then we later find out that Renee may or may not have been involved in the adult
In
industry
the adult industry.
herself. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, as you said, just his age as well, his relationships with his girlfriend, just everything is just different, polar opposite. So, to me, that shows that these elements, like the music or the mentioning of the porn industry, these are all elements of Fred's old life seeping into Pete and kind of
I agree.
reminding him that none of this is real. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's just looking at it as again a reminder, similar to what I said with Mystery Man, as that kind of reminder
Hmm.
creeping in of reality or imagination, and him
Hmm.
pushing that away. So, like you said, with the saxophone saying he hates it, obviously with the porn as well, with obviously what we see is basically looking at whether Renee was or wasn't, and I think
Hmm.
it's definitely
In
a shut off
inverse.
point for him. Yeah,
Yes.
it's complete inverse. It's a
Hmm.
complete inverse of the first half, which again just massively strengthens the theory that it is the fugue state because he's
Exactly.
shutting everything off from his previous life identity. He's trying to shut everything down, which is why everything is the polar opposite, and why Pete is just a counterpart to him in the first place. Yeah, so I completely agree.
Exactly. And I also think, remember how we mentioned at the start Lynch's like musical hints, like how he
Hmm.
starts it with Bowie's I'm Deranged?
Yeah,
Did you notice the song that plays during Patricia Arquette's first appearance as Alice?
no, remind me.
So it's a song by the Drifters, This Magic
Hmm.
Moment. However, it's being performed by Lou Reed. So this got me thinking, like it's a cover of a well-known song.
Yeah.
It's taking something recognizable, like a song by the Drifters, and then tweaking it and making it a cover. So it's suddenly
Wow.
not
Okay.
familiar, right?
I
So you have
never would
that
have
in
thought of that.
itself.
Yeah, I never would have thought of that. That's actually makes complete sense.
And there's also the lyrics of themselves that go, this magic moment, so different and so new, but like any other. I don't know.
So different,
Maybe now
so
I'm
new.
just exactly.
Well, I know.
Exactly.
I think that's clear. Like, I don't know how I haven't picked up on that before. It's clearly there for a reason. You know, that had to be the song
Mhm.
chosen. Again, does nothing but strengthen the theory that we've already put forward about the middle piece in the film. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I mean, I wouldn't have noticed that, I don't think, if it was just that. I think it's just because it's so obvious at the start when it opens with that Bowie song that I was like, okay, are there some other musical clues? Because that first one is
Makes
so
sense.
obvious.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
So there are some supplemental interviews with the cast on the Criterion Blu-ray, which I don't know. Do you own it? You must, yeah?
Yeah,
Or no?
I am quite sad about myself. I haven't been through them yet. Unfortunately,
Oh,
I know. I do need to watch them. I own the
yeah.
Criterion. Funny enough, it's the only way you can't actually stream Lost Highway anywhere here. It's not even available on like demand or anything. Is it the same in Canada as well?
No, we have criteria on the
Oh,
channel.
of
I'm
course you
so
have the
surprised that
channel.
you guys don't have it. It
No,
like blows my
we
mind.
we don't have it. No, so a lot of David Lynch films are the same, where you can only access them via Criterion or physical release, which can be
Hmm.
quite hard to actually get a hold of. I remember when I was trying to get Wilder Heart, for example. Something like Park Chan Wook,
Good
weirdly, I
luck.
think Park Chan Wook in North America is the same, where you kind of have to, or use, pirate anything or whatever. But yeah,
Mhm.
I do own the Criterion for Lost Highway. I do need to watch the other features on it. I always forget to.
So definitely check it out because there
Yeah,
is one special feature where Patricia Arquette reveals that she told Lynch that she was going to approach the roles of Renee and Alice as two different characters. And
yeah,
Lynch actually kept repeating to her, they are the same person, which I find
interesting.
really interesting. And even the mystery man says at one point, he says, her name is Renee. If she said it was Alice, she's lying.
She's lying. Yeah, yeah.
So again, same
Again,
person.
yeah. Strength
Yeah,
is the theory we've already put forward. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I'm just like driving our idea home. So if anybody doubts
I
us,
mean,
they can't doubt
it.
us.
I don't know how you can doubt at this point. There are so many. Like, this
Yeah.
can't just all be coincidence, you know?
No,
Like, of
there's
course.
no way. Even the end as well, like when Alice whispers to Pete on the beach, you'll never have me. Like, of course he's never gonna have her because she's dead.
Because she's dead.
And
Yeah, you'll never
like,
have me, obviously.
yeah.
And it's like,
So
again, it's the same actor, and it's all you have to look at is their relationship on a level of how she sees him in both sides of it, and how he sees her as well. And I think that does nothing but strengthen the theory again, in that they are entirely counterparts, not in just their personalities, but in their other half's personality also. It's just an entire counterpart of it. So yeah, again, strength is the theory worth putting across, 100%.
absolutely. And so, yeah, so this entire time, Fred is actually in prison. And to me, as we said, the full on fugue state starts when he's in prison. And I
Yeah,
think this is now where I was going to mention that final scene. I think that he snaps out of his fugue state in that final scene where he's zipping down the highway and his head starts shaking and
I
he's like
love that.
thrashing behind the wheel.
Maybe
I
my
think
favorite scene ever. It's so good. It's
ever?
so good.
Oh, wow.
One
It's
up there.
creepy.
I watched. So you think I've watched Lost Highway 7 times? That just final sequence. It's
Uh-huh.
over 100 times now, easily.
Jesus.
I
Oh, that's
love that scene.
crazy. It is
I
good.
mean, it's the music, the drive.
Hmm.
Again, so go back to what you were saying. I agree. I think that's his mind escaping the fugue state, and I think that obviously the highway is meant to determine that there is nowhere to go. You can't escape your
Yes.
life. Similar
Yes.
to what I was saying with the Mystery Man, that's literally the whole point of it. It's an endless highway. There's nowhere to run from your life and your mind. And I love that scene. I think that scene is,
Hmm.
I mean, A, incredibly poignant, but B, just so fucking good. Sorry, I don't know. Can I
It
swear on
is.
here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I did
Okay, then
earlier too, so
you have
go
to
for it.
check with podcast. You have to check.
It's true.
But yeah, I completely agree. I think that is his mind kind of entering, re-entering, leaving the fugue state. I think that's
Yes.
where he
Yes.
begins to fall off. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm
Would you
definitely with you there.
say that the head shaking is actually him on the electric chair being electrocuted?
Yes, absolutely. I think that makes complete sense.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
literally
Okay.
look at the visuals for it. Like the
Yes.
sound of
Yes.
him shouting, the visuals, him seated could even be argued as well. 100%.
Yes.
100%. I think, and
And
also I think that sort of trauma to the brain as well, just in general, it is a massive, massive
yes.
thing that could happen. So yeah, absolutely. 100%.
To go back to your point on the highway, because we keep kind of touching
Yeah.
upon it, a metaphor, I think, in itself, the two-lane road could be the two plots of our protagonists running or driving at the same time. What do you think?
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely
And
agree.
so Lynch has said that a lot of Lost Highway is internal. He said that it's Fred's story, according to Fred's logic, and he never wants to say too much. And I think in that Lynch on Lynch book that I
Yeah.
mentioned that you said you're
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah.
get, he says, quote, the clues are all there for a correct interpretation. And I keep saying that in a lot of ways. It's a straight ahead story, end quote. So
Interesting.
I don't know, like when I break it down, honestly, before I started doing research for this episode, I was like, Lost Highway is so confusing. I love it, but it's so confusing. And now, after taking the time to put all these pieces together, I actually think it's easier to follow than people give it credit for. Thoughts?
I do on more than one watch. So I
Yes.
think that when I first went into it, I probably didn't put the pieces together. I think that the main thing with Lost Highway is I think there is very much something to follow, and I think it's easier than people give it credit for what you say. But I still think
Hmm.
there's so many different pieces that you're just gonna be to and from, like with the videotapes for us. But I
Hmm.
do agree. I think that there is definitely something to follow, but it's one that will come the more you watch. You know what I mean? I don't think
Hmm.
I could have established everything or
Yeah,
nearly half of whatever on first watch. I don't. It's yeah, but I agree. I think it's definitely less confusing than
no. Hmm.
maybe given credit. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
Definitely,
Because then you
definitely.
have, as we were saying, Inland Empire, which I mean,
No idea.
totally different.
Absolutely no idea. I
I
could watch
still
the
don't
film.
know.
No, I could watch the film 20 times. I'd still have no idea. No idea.
uh,
That's confusing. But then
yes.
maybe we watch that many times, and maybe we draw the same conclusion as
We
Lost
could
Highway.
try.
Like, do
Maybe
you
you
know what I
should come
mean?
back for an episode for that instead of the
Yeah,
other thing we were
in
planning.
like 2 years'
Oh,
time, when I've watched it 20 more times,
exactly.
then maybe I'll know what the opening scene means.
Same. Oh
But no,
God.
I agree. I do think it has, whether you choose to believe our theory or not, which I think most people
Hmm.
do. It
Hmm.
has a pathway. It has a rhyme and a rhythm. You know?
Have you heard of that other theory? I'm not
Yes,
going to
because I
get
know what
into
you're
it
going
too
to say.
much because I don't even understand it that much, but the one that it's all Lynch commenting on the film industry.
That's the one I was alluding to earlier. So,
Yeah.
and again, I'm similar to you, right? I haven't read enough into it, but
Hmm.
essentially, you've got the mystery man who could be seen as an allegory for criticism per se,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
you've got Dick Laurent, who is obviously a filmmaker, especially in that
Hmm.
second half, and then.
Hmm.
For example, a lot of the eroticism you see could be identified that Dick Laurent makes. It could be identified as Lynch. A lot of the criticism he's had during his career is overindulgent imagery, should I say, shock value, over sexual
Hmm.
scenes, a parody almost of the criticism he has received, and Dick Laurent being his puppet to portray that as a filmmaker. That's one that I went into a little bit, and I can definitely understand, but I don't know. I've not read too much. And there's
Too
also
much.
I'm sure you've read it as well. I did note it down about kind of the a commentary on the plagiarism as well
Hmm. Yep. Yep. Yep.
of
Yep.
Oliver Stone and
Hmm.
Tarantino, Natural Born Killers, and then
Yep.
also True Romance and Wild at Heart. Very much one that's
Hmm.
been going back and forth. And then obviously you've got the Patricia Arquette aspects and the kind of runaway aspects of True Romance. And that's another one I've read into. But I think most of the stuff I've read and that I've come up with myself has been very much related to the fugue state, which we've gone into.
Same.
Absolutely. But there's a bunch of
Exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
I do find the whole thing being just the whole film is not real and literally is just a commentary on the film industry. I do find that one really interesting, and I do want to
Same
read some
here.
more about it because even though I don't believe it, it does strike me as something Lynch would do, just to be like, "Fuck you guys," you know what I mean? As something just in that
Absolutely.
aspect. Let me just go absolutely crazy whilst also telling you that you're idiots.
Yes.
I do like the idea, and I wish I believed that in a sense. Do you know what I mean? I do like that a
Same.
lot.
Same.
Yeah,
I feel like if Lynch wasn't so firm with probably one of the few times in his career to say this is what it is, I would
yeah.
probably believe that theory more.
Because it
Probably.
would fit Lynch, wouldn't it? His
Yes.
personality, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like he'd be for then in keeping his style whilst also telling you he doesn't care about keeping his style and he's going to keep his style.
Yes.
But yeah, I did find that one really interesting because I'd thought there were scenes that I'd watched before and I'd be like, okay, that makes sense in terms of
Hmm.
a weird example. But have you seen what's the Lars von Trier film called? The House that Jack Built, for example.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
I would
I
say
love
the
it.
ending of that
Hmm.
film is very much Lars addressing his critics in a way, and I did see things in that in Lost Highway, but I hadn't conjured up that theory that it was the whole thing. And when you look back, there are scenes where you could be like, okay, that makes sense, but then also wishful thinking. I think I
Yes.
think it's just one that people want to be true. Whereas actually, as we know, there's
Yes,
a
we know.
right. We know there's a
Yes.
right. There's a right theory here.
I
Definitely.
mean, what more do you want if that's what he said himself? But
Yeah. I mean,
anyway.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add before we start to wrap this little chat?
we went through everything that I had down. Yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
did. We did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we blitzed through it. I'm proud of us. So the film was released in France in January of 1997. That same month, I believe it had its North American premiere at Sundance, it was,
Mm-hmm.
before getting its limited release in theaters in February 21st.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't do that well at the box office. Critics were totally split whether or not they liked it. Notably, Gene
Roger.
Siskel and Roger
Oh,
Ebert,
yeah.
gave it
Yep,
the
yep, yep.
2 thumbs down.
Yeah.
Did you hear what Lynch did then with the promotional poster?
No, I don't think so.
So after those two gave the 2 thumbs down, Lynch famously put that on his promotional poster, their review, and
I have
underneath it
heard
he wrote 2 more reasons to see Lost Highway.
it. That's brilliant. And then 3 years later, or 4 years later, Mulholland Drive came out, and then Roger Ebert was
Yes.
all over it. He loved it.
Yes. Like
Maybe Roger Ebert was lying because he was scared of Lynch. Maybe that's the
yes.
theory.
It's the only thing.
Yeah. I have heard of that before. Actually, it's really, really funny. Again, very Lynch.
I love
isn't
it. So Lynch.
Mm.
But so yeah, so in the years to come, I think people really started looking at this as a quality piece of cinema that was initially overlooked in his filmography, which seems to be par for the course with a lot of his stuff. And now what I love so much is people are watching it, our generation, and I think that's also thanks to folks like yourself with these big followings online that are pushing it even more so. So thank you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
great.
Yeah,
You're definitely right. I think the more people that watch it online, I think the more people that push it, and the more like bigger accounts, it's
mhm,
just going to get watched more, isn't it? And that's just a
for sure.
counterpart to
The
it. That's the
beauty
good points of TikTok and social
to
media and
this,
whatever,
yes.
Letterboxd. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And I just overall, that's what's so cool to me about David Lynch is after Fire Walk with Me, after people not liking it initially, he goes to make Lost Highway. And like we said, it's kind of like a fuck you, fuck your wants, fuck your needs. I'm making something how I want to make it, right?
Exactly.
And it just hits you that Lynch makes films for himself above all. And
The
I
best
love that.
filmmakers do, in my opinion. The best filmmakers make
Exactly.
films for themselves. That's the whole
Exactly.
point of self-indulgence is to make films that you want to see, and then they'll come across the best. And if people like them,
Mhm.
they do. If they don't, who cares? They're for you anyway.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
So I want to leave you with a quote from Lynch, one that he gave to Rolling Stone in March after Lost Highway came out in 1997. He
Hmm.
said, quote, every single element in a movie now has to be understood and understood at the lowest common denominator. It's a real shame because there's so many places that people could go if they weren't corralled so tightly with these kinds of restraints,
It's
which I love.
most people who start watching films is exactly it, and that's where
Yeah.
I was, and that's what I try and push now. Is exactly the point, and I credit Lynch for that
Oh,
transition in mindset.
wow. I love
Because I
that. Oh,
think,
that's
yeah, definitely. Because I think that's you discover Lynch's films, curiosity takes over. You watch Lynch's interviews, and there you go.
mhm.
You stop caring
There you go.
about a solidified answer, and you start just watching films for films, and then taking from what you will. And I think that's once people establish that and kind of transition to that mindset, you'll enjoy films so much more. Like so much
Absolutely.
more, which is kind of what I went through when I was like 20 or whatever.
hmm Well, I think that's a perfect place to stop this with such a wholesome little ending. So, is there
Yeah.
anything you want to shout out, Seth, at all? Your podcast or socials?
Shout out McFly's Movie House.
Love it. Love
Also,
it.
ReelTok podcast as well. Rival podcast.
Rival podcast.
The Rival podcast. Yeah.
Love it.
Seth's film reviews on TikTok and Twitter. Or X, should I say.
Yes.
And
Ugh.
Instagram as well. I've never said X, by the way.
Neither. I hate it.
Yeah.
Who says
But
it?
yeah, that's the main things I know.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on. I will have you back on again in the future. And yeah, cool. See you, Seth.
Perfect. Bye.